All right. Hi, everyone. We're going to get started shortly. As you guys enter, please, we love to hear from you. So if you could take a minute and enter your name and where you're calling in from in the chat, and we'll get started in just a minute. Hi, Drew. Welcome. Oh, hey, Daniel. I see Sita here. That's awesome. All right. Yeah, everyone, this is going to be, I'm going to mention it again, but this is going to be a very interactive webinar. This is really for you. So please definitely, oh, hi, Tyler. Good to see a familiar name here. This is really for you. So get comfortable talking to us through chat and Q&A. Again, I'm going to mention it again, but that's the best way to get the most out of this kind of webcast. All right. So today we're going to be talking about the first 90 days as a head of product, and we're going to be talking with Christine Itwaru. This series, by the way, for those of you who follow us at Productside, we have a podcast, which is a very popular series on it called Making the Most Out of Your First 90 Days as a Product Leader. We got so much great feedback on this podcast that we decided to bring it to our audience live in a different format. So for those of you who do not know me, my name is Rina Alexin. I'm the CEO of Productside. I'm also the host of Productside Stories, which is our podcast. And I'm located here in extra sunny Miami, Florida. That's probably why I look this way. And joining me today, Christine, welcome. Why don't you introduce yourself really briefly?
Yeah, hi. Thank you for having me, Rena. Yes, I'm Christine Itwaru, and I'm joining you from Raleigh, North Carolina, where it's somewhat sunny and a little bit overcast, but probably almost as hot as Miami. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's not going to get any cooler. It's already June. Okay, so this webinar, like I mentioned, it's really going to be more of an Ask Me Anything format. And I'm going to go over quick housekeeping items first to get us oriented. Then Christine and I are going to talk for a little bit about how to make the most out of your first 90 days as a product leader. And then we're going to open it to questions from the audience. So who are we? So at Productside, we consider ourselves an outcome-driven product partner. We work with product management teams of all sizes, and our goal is to bring skills and capabilities and help transform organizations to having a product mindset. The way that we do this is through our approach, which is really custom. We do assessments, diagnostics. We work with product leaders to really understand what's going on at their organizations. And then we craft a training program that's really designed to improve product teams. And it's staffed by our very deep bench of invested experts. And I'm going to keep saying it. Please, please, please ask questions. These webinars are designed for you. And so for you to get the most out of it, it's to ask any kind of question that you want. Christine and I are really here for you. I'm going to also answer the most popular question that we get, and that is, can I watch this later? And the answer is yes. We will be posting a video of this webcast after the recording has ended. For those of you who are looking to get in touch with their community, consider joining our LinkedIn group. There's a QR code, and we're going to also paste a URL in the chat. Our LinkedIn group is a great place for you to connect with your peers, share best practices, ask questions, just get more advice from your peers. And now we're going to get into the heart of it. So before we get started, we're going to launch this poll. And that is really just for us to, to orient our conversation today, to make sure that we're talking to our audience wherever you are in your career. Jerry, could you please launch the poll? All right, so as we wait, Christine, I'm gonna kick us off with just the first question, and that is, how did you get involved in product management. What's your story?
Sure. Oh, I love this question. I've been in it like 13, 14 years now, at a time at which a lot of people were doing something in tech, and they didn't realize that it was product, or that they accidentally fell into product. So I fall into that latter bucket. I was working for an investment bank as more internal product marketing for a proprietary system that my boss was building alongside 10 other humans. So a small team of 11, and they were bringing digital transformation to the organization in a very small way. We didn't really know what that was until more recently, or the last 5 to 10 years, or 5 to 7 years. I was just training people on the sales and equity sales and trading floor, and research floors around, like, how do you use this product? How do you log your calls? How do you see the latest research? All this stuff. It was a fun product to build. The space wasn't something that was really exciting to me, but what ended up happening was I was sitting down with a research analyst in London, and was kind of looking at him very frustrated, just trying to get whatever he needed from the front page. We called it a ticker homepage. Just ticker was the name of the original product. And he was like, I just, I can't do this. And he's got, his like turret phone system. He's got a regular phone. He's got people coming in his office. And I just sat there and watched him. And I was like, this guy's not going to learn anything I need him to learn. He's not going to do the thing that his leadership wants him to do around call logging or any of the stuff in here, because he's just too busy. And I realized that I needed to find a way to make my product fit into his life, not make him use my product, if that makes sense. And I just talked to him. I just asked him a whole bunch of questions. What's going on? What do you do on a day-to-day basis? What's disrupting you? Because I could see it. And then here are the goals that we know we have for you. I went back to my hotel room that night, and I redrew this widget that we had. No, it was like a core widget for them to use. And then I took it to my boss the next day, and I was like, "Hey, I think this will be really cool." And then he did it. And then like he changed it. And then that analyst was like, "Holy cow, I'm going to use this." And then my boss was like, "Hey, a couple months later, you're ready to switch into sales and trading? You're going to go get your license and all that stuff." And I was like, "Actually, no, like I want to do more of what I did with this, with that research analyst, and do this more for the product." He's like, "Are you sure? Like, that's not gonna make you a ton of money, right?" And before this webinar started, Rena and I were talking about career paths, and like what you go down on, and like meaning, what do you choose? Is it something safe? Is it something exciting? And in that moment, I was like, I really love doing this. And I want to pursue it. And if this is something I could do to get paid to do, then I'm gonna do it. And that's how I fell into product. And then it was a lot of self-teaching at that point, and just kind of looking out for any resources that were in the market at that time that I can learn about what product management was. So long story, but like I think every time I tell it, there was at least one or two people on a call or a webinar was like very similar. Had no idea what it was, started doing it, and fell in love. So
Yeah, and I mean, in the past, there really weren't that many career paths, or the title or role wasn't even that established in most companies. So, a lot of people, when I talk to them about their background, share something very similar. That it was just something that happened to them, and they were inspired by essentially a customer interaction, just like you're talking about here.
mhm.
Well, I'm going to share the results of our poll, Christine, because it's really interesting and I'm not surprised. The majority, actually 43% of our audience here, are product managers looking to advance into a product leadership role.
Yeah.
And the other 40% are either leaders actively looking for a role, or a leader in the role looking to recharge their team. So we're going to definitely talk, and we're not going to be sharing slides. It's really going to be a very intimate conversation here, essentially about how to think about product leadership and how to even think about getting the right role. So I think we're going to definitely have a conversation that's relevant for just about everybody here.
Awesome.
So, Christine, and this is something that, since you just kind of brought it up, I mean, that's how you got into product management. What inspired you to end up journeying into product leadership, taking that next step in your career?
Yeah, that same role that same place I fell into product. I don't know if it was an accident. Now that you say it, I'm saying it out loud. I almost accidentally, but like forcefully, was put into just a managerial role, and I didn't even think about becoming a manager. I remember I got that role the day after I came back from maternity leave with my first kid. And I was nervous. I'm like, what's happening here? Like, I went out on leave and now I'm coming back and you're like, you're going to manage these people. And I was like, what? Because, like I said, I was so in love with the product role and doing that IC stuff that I just never thought about that. I just wanted to keep doing it and make money doing it. And then my boss was like, no, I think you also have the chops to coach other people on how to do this and to teach other people the way. And I was like, wow, okay. So, to answer it, I was very lucky that I had a manager who, to this day, every time we talk, he's like, just remember to pay it forward. That was always his advice to me anytime I was expressing gratitude and like, how do I thank you? You put me on this path. He's like, just pay it forward. And he was like, I saw something there. And I think that when people see leadership qualities in other humans, they should at least give it a shot. I was really scared. Like I think I said, just having my first child and coming back a couple years into product and then having to now manage three grown men. I was like, what is this? What am I gonna do? But that I started looking into it and I said, okay, there's very quickly a lot of content around manager versus leader. And it hit me like since I wasn't thinking about taking on the job of manager, I was trying to figure out what aspects of this do I want to keep as part of this new step in my career. So I looked at, okay, leadership, what does that mean overall? And then that's sort of where I zoned in. I was like, okay, what does leadership mean and how do we then take it into product and figure out not just how to grow your humans, but then like influence others across the organization. And product is one of those roles that you can actually do that with because you do have to interface across the board. So hopefully that answers your question, but like that's
Yeah.
how I ended up just saying, you know what, I love this and I do want to continue doing this. So yeah.
Yeah, I liked, so the other day I saw something that came out about Canva and that they don't have managers, they have coaches. And
Hmm.
I think that the coaching responsibility of a product leader, it's the most important one because it's no longer about you doing the work yourself, but making sure that you're setting the right vision and creating practices and process that enable your team to be really successful.
Hmm.
So agree. Okay, so our goal today is really to discuss the first 90 days of product leadership, and you've been in several leadership roles now. Uh, in order to set yourself up for success, I think let's talk about the importance of selecting the right company first to work for, because
Hmm.
I don't know if you've seen this, but I've seen that the average tenure of a product leader these days is under 3 years. It's around like hovering around 2.5 years. And I
Hmm.
think part of that is due to just people stepping into potentially a culture that doesn't embrace product management. So let's talk about that. So thinking about product management cultures, how do you set yourself up for success in a leadership role by essentially assessing the organization you are applying for?
Yeah, I'll probably flip flop back and forth between current company and most recent. Before I joined yesterday was 6 months at my current company, honestly, and so we're going to talk about that first 3 months for sure. But prior to Vitally, which is where I'm head of product now, I was a couple things at Pendo in different leadership roles. And what happened was the company before Pendo was not. It was more of a financial services company, not again the domain that I was really craving that I wanted to serve, but I kept thinking about product itself and trying to figure out how I can like really hone in on the product craft and be able to take that somewhere else. Just so happens that one of the companies that, builds product for product people, Pendo, was looking for somebody. So I definitely was like, okay, that's awesome. I'm going to give it a shot. And the culture there was pretty good. It was phenomenal. And I think you mentioned the tenure of a product leader. I think if you find a culture that is wonderful for you, you have to think about where you're starting as a product leader. If you're going in as a director of product or as a senior manager of product, um, are there other things that are within the product org or that are product oriented that you can kind of like either design or step into at some point if you get tired of those other roles? Or are you able to go to the next level? Are you able to get to VP or product? And at Pendo, I was, lucky enough to start as director of product, first director here in the US, move over to head up product operations, and then move over to head up strategy, business strategy, and product strategy, and then do principal type work across the board. Um, and so the reason I stuck to that really hard was because I did love the culture. And I also was was able to coach so many other product people within my company and then outside the walls at some point. When I left that company, it was a really, really, really tough decision, being very transparent. And I just said this yesterday to one of our co-founders because he was like, "Hey, how's, 6 months in? What are you feeling like?" And I was like, actually, I'm really happy because that interview process, when I started talking to these humans, I say humans because that's what they came off as right out the gate. It wasn't, I didn't feel like it was an interview. I felt like it was a place or a group of humans that were trying to figure out if I was the right human to join their tribe. And that felt really cool.
So
Um,
was there anything specific about the interview process or maybe even your own process during the interview, the interview that helped you assess the organization's culture? So how
yeah,
did you draw out that they were the humans?
yeah. We'll talk about the humans and we'll talk about the piece you mentioned earlier, which is product culture and embracing that because
Mhm.
that's really important as you're thinking about making a move. How did I assess the humans? I felt a familiar vibe as I had with Pendo, which was honesty. Um, During the process, they made they were not hesitant to tell me the bad at all. And I thought that was awesome. The transparency and the honesty during that interview process, they weren't sugarcoating anything, to be honest with you. They were just like, here's what's great, here's what's not so great. We're laying it out for you. Up to you if you really wanna come and join this thing or if you don't feel like it, it's fine, and I think that was another really awesome thing. It's like, it's not that they didn't want me there, but it was more like, it has to work for both of us, so why don't we just have this open dialogue and figure that out? The other piece of it is the product culture, and, I speaking a ton to the CEO and CTO who are the co-founders. My boss is the CEO, and he and I were very direct and honest with each other during that entire, process, and he's like, I'm very much a product CEO. I'm very much embedded in the day to day. And he recognized though that he does need to start working with the head of product to start to move himself out of that and focus on other
Mhm.
things. And I think him calling that out, we're at Series B. Him calling that out was incredible because a lot of leaders are like, I'm staying and I'm not leaving, and I just need somebody to come in to grow a product team and push product out the door. And that's awesome too because they're telling you that right out the gate. If you sense that that's not that they're sugarcoating it or they're BSing you, you kind of have to, ask yourself how much of that you want to handle. So I would just encourage everyone to be very open and transparent and say, this is where I thrive. I thrive where I can do this. I thrive where I can lead and coach and do all these other things, whatever you identify as your strengths. And say that to the person you're interviewing with, your potential next boss, and ask if that there's room for you to do that there because there are tons of head of product or product leadership roles out there, but none of them lay out specifically what they're willing to have you come in and actually change in terms of culture, change in terms of mindset. You have to dig in the interview process to figure that out.
Yeah, I love that idea of essentially both parties setting the expectations with each other about what that role entails. Because I have talked to product leaders and recently talked to a chief product officer who believed that they were stepping into a situation where the CEO who was managing products, very similar story, was interested in hiring a head of product to essentially reestablish a product vision. But the reality was that that CEO was not interested in that. They were actually interested in somebody being able to take their ideas and execute on those ideas, which is a
Mhm.
very different role. And so, no surprise why, in the end, that relationship did not work out. So, and I
Yeah.
mean, there's implications there, right? It means there is a essentially a part of your career where you just spent a year plus working at an organization where you're not feeling fulfilled and you're having a lot of stress as a result. So very important to set that up during the interview process.
I do think, I had a conversation with someone about that recently. There's something that people should think about as they're interviewing. And if you do hear that, yeah, you're gonna come in, you're gonna make all these changes, you get to drive roadmap and be very honest and say, well, since you've been doing it for this long, do you truly think that you're gonna be able to lift out day one or day
Mm.
30? Because, I just want to be very clear that like both your success and mine and the company's success is going to depend on us being very real about whether you're going to be able to let go of the reins enough so that I can start taking hold. Or do we have to craft a plan where it's 90, 180, 360 days out where at that point, you're now 20% involved versus 100% involved. Like, are you willing to go through that? Right. So I think if you hear that I've been leading this and blah, 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 dig in as much as you possibly can and ask the questions, because sometimes they will tell you, yeah, I'm willing to do it. Then dig in a little bit more. How much are you willing to do it? What's going to be our plan to get you there? Because I know you're not going to lift out day one unless they truly hate being involved, which no CEO founder hates being involved. So,
No, I'm gonna try not to respond to that one. I'm gonna plead the fifth there. All right. So great points on the interview process, and of course, if there is an opportunity for you to meet other people on the team, always take it because you want to hear as many voices as possible. So try to get a holistic picture of what is the situation, what is the culture that I'm stepping into, and there are people who are truly open-minded that they might be very much involved, but they really want to change, and it's about setting that commitment upfront as well. It's like you said you wanted to change and bringing that into your conversations, into your future one-on-ones. All right. So Christine, you got the job.
yep.
You are now head of product. Let's think about before your first day, how do you think about maybe that first day or first week and setting yourself up for success?
hmm So I always recommend, to the extent that you can, and most companies, most bosses and new teams want you to do this. Reach out before you start and try to get a couple meetings lined up before you start. Um, if you went through this entire interview process, and interview processes these days are very long for a reason. People are trying to keep good talent around, and invest well. Then put in the little bit of extra time that's unpaid. People are like, "It's unpaid. Why would you give up your free time?" Because it's gonna set you up for success, that's why. So I'd say before you start, about a week or 2, just try to get in with the people who you're, introduced to that are gonna be your peers. Let your manager know that. Who's gonna be your product marketing peer is a huge, huge, huge one if you do have a PMM, a org that has a PMM team. Your head of sales, your head of customer success. Who are the people that you're going to be interfacing on a day-to-day basis with? And then just really start that relationship as early as you possibly can. And when you start, that's when you go back and you say, here's what I learned before I started. Here's what I can potentially pull out as like areas where I can drive some impact or kind of partner with you to drive some impact. Let's dig in a little bit more when we start having more recurrent conversations. So I always start with focusing on the people. That's how you set yourself up for success. You can't do anything without meeting the right people. Meaning, if you're a small company like mine, we have 85 people. I met everybody pretty much. I think only recently I met like 1 or 2 people in our EMEA region who I was like, oh, I haven't even met you. And it's, you really want to make those connections, right? So that they also have a direct line to you. Um, Once you meet those people, you're able to understand how you and your team can be of service to them. If you're building your team like I was, you start to identify what somebody will potentially come in and partner with those people on, which is really nice. So you're helping to set expectations out the gate for those humans that you're going to hire. And then it also helps you identify some quick wins when you start to understand the pain that people are experiencing. And everybody's got pain in their organization. So, you just have to lean in a little bit there.
Do you
Um,
have a process by which you met 85 people, but not before starting, right? Like we're talking about over the first 90 plus days, you met everybody.
I met everybody over I met, I would say 75% of the company over the first, oh, I will tell you within the first 30 days, I probably met about 60% of the company. I was
Wow.
not playing around. I
All
was not
right.
around. No.
Yeah, I can attest to whenever I see, and this goes, by the way, not even just for leadership roles, for any role, anybody that's joining our company, I can attest that I notice, everybody notices if you put in that extra effort before joining, if you're starting to read up on the company,
Yep.
asking questions about goals, like what happened, what went wrong, what went right, all of that people notice. So 100% agree that that is super, super valuable. And especially when you're in a leadership role. Okay. People come up all the time in these discussions
Mhm.
because product management can't get anything done without other people in the company. So that's where I was going. Do you have a process by which maybe in the line of questioning that you use or the prioritization of who you go for first? Like, how do you map
Yeah.
out the organization and then how do you get and glean insights from these conversations?
Great question. So as the first head of product here, I realized that I needed to help people kind of just to get to know me before they put a label on what head of product is.
Mhm.
And because I'm both, it's both good and bad that there was no head of product before me, right? You get to craft that. You get to craft what product is going to be at that organization. There were a couple product managers before I was here, but there was no culture around product. So I think getting in and establishing what it is you want them to feel about product management in general, what you want them to feel about your partnership and what you're bringing to the team and the company is really important. I always start with your immediate partners in engineering. So that's where I started. It was who's my peer, who's going to be when I bring in my PMs, who's going to be their peers. I met every single engineer in the company in week one, every single person in engineering did by day 7. And the reason I had said like that 65% stat was I remember clearly we were sitting on a town hall or an all hands, one of these meetings, and our people, talent person was like, "How many people do you think you met?" And I was like, "Pretty sure I met like 65, 70% of the company." It was day 30. So I would say you start with engineering as your immediate partner, and then you've got your peers, right? So mine was VP of sales or head of customer success, ops, product marketing. Who are those people that you're going to be planning with? Not like just interfacing with, but you're going to be planning your team's goals with them because all of you are aligned to the company goals, right? And so everything that we're saying will trickle to our team. So let's get in, let's start this relationship. Um, and then by way of sort of introduction, you start to understand who within those groups you need to meet with next. So with our head of sales, Jason, he was like, I need you to meet with Carly. I need you to meet with, this other person. And I was like, awesome. So that's then when you get into the more of the ICs or like the next line managers and you start to understand where's the pain that they're experiencing from the product perspective and where can your team start to step in, right? So as you're meeting with your peers in leadership, you're understanding how you're going to partner with each other and how you're going to carry the company to the next level, what you need to do to get there. But then when you're meeting with the folks that are on the ground day in and day out, you're starting to understand where you're going to have to prioritize your team's efforts in addition to building product, right? And you go back to product people not being able to do anything without other partners. When you identify the pain from CS and sales and product marketing, I will tell you, it's generally going to be around alignment and transparency. Like that's usually what happens when you get in and there's lack of something between product and the rest of the org. You can very quickly understand what slice of your team's time is going to go towards engaging with other folks and how you can figure out what you need to set up in terms of product operations to get that done so that they are successful.
So how do you so that is like very, very common.
Yeah.
We've experienced it too. Being even us as a small company, we also have problems with communication because communication is constant and is always hard.
Mhm.
So what have you done on your team in the first 90 days to maybe get that quick win of increasing transparency and increasing communication across teams?
I will always say this. It was the first thing we did at Pendo when we created product ops was create a product digest. That is just a
Mm.
source of truth for everybody, a home for people to know what's going on in product. So we send ours out. It's biweekly. And then my PM Katie was phenomenal, and she was like, "I think we should do Amazon style kind of meeting the day after we send out this digest." And it was really cool. It was very much accepted by my head of sales and customer success because they were like, "Yeah, you know what? Because this is going to make sure this is going to kind of be the forcing function. People are going to have to read it. We're all on camera reading this thing for the first 5 minutes, adding in notes and questions. So it's not like they can turn around and be like, we missed it unless they missed the meeting and unless they truly didn't read the thing." So we have this centralized asset. We all take ownership of that because we don't have a product ops person today. So I've been doing a lot of that. Um, and then we have that meeting that happens every 2 weeks, and it's phenomenal. Yesterday we did a check-in. So the next thing is once you have that process set up or the system, make sure you're checking in frequently on whether it's working or if you need to mature it. So we checked in yesterday after the meeting. That meeting went from like 30 minutes to 15. And I was like, is it that it's not loved anymore? Is it that, and people are like, no, it's just great because you guys are giving us information so quickly and we understand what's happening and what's not happening anymore that we're like, we barely have questions. So I'm like, win, like huge. So that I think when you find the common pain across the organization, then you should lean into it. From the product side, no, I'll use product side. I say that a lot, but it works for you. But from the product perspective, you lean into that.
Sorry. I mean, that's why I love our new
I
name,
figured
product
that,
side. Yeah.
side note, like honestly, I said it the other day and then I was like, I'm not talking about the company, but then here it is. I wonder if she picked it because people say it so often.
We're by the side of product leaders. So we are
Yeah,
definitely on the product side
exactly.
anyway.
Yeah.
So I mean, I love that. I love that you found something in your conversations and you were able to then, quickly create an action, like an action. So the insights are useless unless you actually act on it. And then this is one where you're so visible to the rest of the company as well, in terms of, I mean, just like allowing people to ask questions. I love that you had a quick win of this 30-minute meeting is now 15 minutes because it's so effective.
Hmm.
But we kind of started this conversation of the importance of also the leadership at the organization. So how did you set up? So I love that for the rest of the organization, but what about managing up? What about your, the C-suite and your peers on the leadership team?
Yeah, there's generally constant comms between us. Operationally, you need to have a place where you can just throw your ideas in. So hopefully everybody has a Slack channel or whatever you're communicating through. And all of us are in that. So my peers and I are sitting in there day in and day out. What do you think about this? Here's what's going on in my org. All the things that might impact everybody else. We do routine meetings and then we do two meetings a quarter at this point to check in, one to check in and then one to make sure that our goals for the following quarter are ready to go. And then it's on us at that point to sit down and start planning together. I mentioned like those are the people you're going to plan with, so that their orgs know what to do because this is what you're doing and vice versa. Um, so I think that's the operational side of it. Repeat the question. I want to make sure I answer the.
Yeah, because I want to make sure that when you're setting yourself up, so you have now this quick win around that's visible to the rest of the company of the product digest, but there's also relationships that you have to build with your leadership team. And how do you how do you learn how to work super well with the leadership team and the CEO?
Man, how do you answer that question? I'm a people person, so
Mhm.
I'm gonna naturally want to talk to people.
Mhm.
I will say that one of the things I did in the beginning, this is before and during the start, because there were a couple of people I didn't get to talk to before that period, my official start date. I start with just like who I am. And I think that that vulnerability and that honesty about who you are as a human really sets the tone and makes people realize that I'm a human just like you. And we're here to grow the business, but we also are humans outside of here. Some of us have kids, some of us have partners. There's a bunch of other things that we have going on in our lives. So establish that. And I think that just lays the groundwork for an amazing experience across your leadership team. My CEO, I'm very, very, very fortunate. Like he's also very receptive to things like that. I remember the first big leadership meeting that we had this like this session where we talked about, two impactful moments in our lives. And
Mm.
we shared out, these two things and what that meant for us and why it's pivoted or it's made us think and behave the way we do. And it just gave such different perspective into a lot of decisions and a lot of conversations that I've had with Jamie, my CEO. I'm like, okay, I can totally see maybe where that's coming from, or totally get that. I can see it now. So I think being very vulnerable and opening up as a human is really important when you're coming into a leadership seat. You're not there just to be like head of, VP of, or whatever the title is, and have people look at you as like, they're going to tell me what to do. You want to trickle that culture down to the rest of the organization and like have everybody create this culture of transparency, openness, honesty with each other. I was saying that to my CTO the other day. I'm very fortunate that here we're very direct and honest with each other. If something is bad on the product and we've made that change, everyone will turn around and be like, "This is not so great." And there's no shame in it. There's no hard feelings for my PMs or me. It's like, tell me more. What's going on? And I love that because you cannot have that without people opening up and just being kind of normal and human with each other. Um,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
So I
love
think that,
that.
yeah.
I'm gonna just kind of chime in on a couple of things. One thing that you said is so real. It's like at the end, we're human.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I try to live by is recognizing that everybody has their own inner circle. So
Mhm.
it's their family, it's their friends, it's the people who essentially who sometimes don't see you as a company, but let's say a spouse where their spouse is now working late at night. So they tend to have only negative interactions with the company. That
Yeah.
just it tends to be that way. And so paying attention to people's inner circles actually gives you an ability to also say like do something nice for the people that they care about.
Oh, for sure. There's
Yeah.
when another thing we did was the user manual approach with my team, and I do that for every.
What is that?
Oh man, it's a set of questions. I've got it posted up on my blog if anybody wants to take a look at it, but it's just, how do you work best? What motivates you?
Mm,
What do you do outside of work? And it gives you insight into exactly what you said, that human's inner circle, what's going on, so that you have a different perspective of them other than this is our head of product. She's here to build product. She's here to help grow the company to the next, to like Series C and next, and it's not so much the answering of the questions on paper that gets things to where they need to be. It's the conversation that happens between the people after those questions are answered on paper. I've seen people dig in and like, oh, talk to me more about what you do when you go camping in this area, and like what drove you to want to do camping. You can't pay me to camp. Like, so I want to know more about that. And I think that that's great. Like my boss and I did a very similar thing when I started, and it really helps with just like, again, that human aspect and understanding what drives you. And there's a lot in those questions. There's a lot that just relates back to product. Before, when you and I were chatting before, we talked about how much the product process and the thought of building out something can be applied to everything we do in life.
mhm.
And when you're answering these things like what motivates you and what's this and what's that, you find that you're like this product stuff is drawn out of you sometimes. It's like, and I wanted to test this and then I saw it was successful. So here's what I did next. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like, and just as we were talking about product management practices could be applied to just about everything.
Hmm.
So maybe sometimes a little bit too much. All right. So we're about to get into our Q&A portion. I obviously have many more questions, but everybody in the audience, if you want to just use either the Q&A button or you can also comment in the chat and we're going to take your questions shortly. First, I want to ask Christine, something else that I often hear from product leaders is that when they're entering a new organization, there are some, I don't know, it's like unspoken issues. It's amazing that you have a culture where people actually are honest and,
Yeah.
are truth tellers. But there are sometimes practices or assumptions of like, oh, we've always done this way before,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Hmm.
So how do you, and I like to call it like there's like a ghost that you're sometimes fighting that you're not aware of. How do you maybe draw out elements of the ghost in the
Yeah.
organization?
Yes, and I'm going to very clearly say we don't have a culture where 100% of the people are going to be open and honest and direct. People are just sometimes not comfortable doing that for whatever reason in their past or their past companies. We definitely do have some folks who lean a ton on more like, this is how it was done in the past, and so here's what I can predict will happen. And in those instances, I always I remind myself first, they've probably been here for a while and they're probably handling in their minds a situation where they're like, oh great, I might have to do damage control, or I might have to
Mm,
do this, and they're trying to get ahead of it and avoid that. Or something went wrong and I just wasn't here and I didn't see it. So it's one, I ask myself, like, how long have they been here? Has it been long enough where this has happened? And just say, hey, I totally value your perspective from, where you sit and how long you've been here. I think that we might have different, like factors right now that might contribute to a different outcome. So why don't we kind of sit down and take a look at what's different this time? So that's one way of doing it. The other is I always start a role in saying, like, I'm not coming in here with the way I've operated before, and in terms of prioritization, planning, building, or anything. I need to now craft that for Vitally. I need to look at the organization as it is today and work with you to figure out how we take this thing forward. So you kind of set this partnership angle up a little bit early on, and you say, tell me what it's like today. Give me the need to know on how we got here, and then let's craft this thing going forward together. And that tends to work. There are folks everywhere who are just kind of like, well, It's not gonna do it because this is just what it's been before, and this is how it's been. And that's okay. That's PTSD. They've got to work through it. You just have to remind yourself that like you're there to do something, and the most you can do is say, here's how we can potentially take this forward. You're going to partner with me. Here's where I see you're adding value, and or you can add value here.
So, Christine, there's a question that just came in from Drew that I think is relevant here, and that is, how do you go about building credibility, authority, and trust in the organization, particularly around decisioning or process? And you kind of just, I think, started answering that question of you're trying to draw out what is the current state and
Yeah.
talking directly with people. But do you have any other advice of what somebody can do in that situation?
Yes, Drew, it's a great question. So there's drawing out of the current state, understanding what got us there, but then looking at where we're going and why we're going there, and that always anchors everybody to a common goal. So, you build your credibility and your trust by, what I said before, being honest, direct, and just kind of giving people a piece of who you are, being truthful as well to yourself. But really looking at what is the vision of the CEO and where is this coming from? How do I now define a strategy with the CEO, or now just do it on my own if you have a really hands off one? And then how do I align my team to that? And then I think what's worked really well in the past, and I'm seeing it work well now, is my PMs having conversations with the day-to-day folks that are on the ground with
Mhm.
customers, showing them why this thing that we're doing fits into that strategy. And as we're talking to customers and as we're building something out, they're like, and this aligns to this here, and this will get us to this here, and this helps us hit this goal here. Is adoption a goal here? Is it NRR? Like, what are we looking at? And telling the rest of the organization the story around why you're doing that work is really impactful, because a lot of work can be done because a customer asked for it. But when you're able to tie it back to a purpose that's going to grow the business, people are like, oh, okay, they're looking out for everyone here.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that advice, and kind of also said it at the start around just the importance of outcomes and being outcome oriented.
Uh-huh.
But Drew asked a second question. It's a part two of this one, and that is, how much of those strategy elements were there when you started?
Mhm.
And I guess the point here is, if you have those and they're strong and they're right, uh, those conversations that you're talking about right now of like linking it to those outcomes are easier. What happens also maybe in a situation where you don't have that well set out?
Yeah. I mentioned earlier sitting down with my CEO and understanding what's his appetite for letting go.
Mm,
And we had lots of good conversations, and we agreed on a gradual path to him hitting a point of like, okay, he's not going to ever officially let go, but here's where we want to be in a year. So I sat down and I was like, okay, great. Now tell me about the strategy. Tell me about where we are today and how this aligns to the company vision and where we want to go. So I would say, to answer it, I would say he had a strategy that was 100% his. And then as we got in and we brought in head of customer success and me around the same time, we were like, okay, now let's look at the data that we have today coming in from the product, coming in from customers. And then let's figure out if that actually makes a ton of sense and if that will carry us to where we want to go long term. And we actually changed our thinking right now around how we get to where we want to go. So I think just a piece of advice, everybody: treat data like it's currency. Like, make sure you get a lot of it. Make sure you hold on to it for the moments that you absolutely need. Use it very wisely, and make sure that you are using it in the moments where you need to influence your partners the most, not just kind of like the data says and the data says and blah blah blah. Like, in those moments, just have something in your back pocket to say, like, I don't know if this is where we're going to go. Here's what the data is currently showing us.
I'm going to use that. Use data as a currency. I love it. Christine, I just want to add to your answer around, if you don't have really strong strategy in place. I agree. It always starts with the discussion.
Yeah.
We actually have an outcome and strategy discussion template that for everybody listening, we're going to add that to the follow-up email as well, because and that template was really designed for product leaders to be talking with their product managers to make sure everybody's on the same page of what are the outcomes we're trying to accomplish. But I even like this application of that to have the product leader and the CEO get on the same page, of that it should start with that conversation too. So great point. All right, we have a question here from Jared Brooks, and that's around hiring product managers and building a high performance team. This is a really I guess, big question, but maybe you could share just a few tips of what you look
Mhm.
for when you're hiring product managers.
No, we could do a whole webinar about
I
this
know.
one.
We
But it's
do. We
good. It's
have
a,
one.
that's not a response of disgust, Jared. It was just me being like, there's so much to talk about. Um, I had to bring in 2 product managers when I started, and I always lean back into, where are we today at a like as a company? What are we faced with? And that all comes to you based on the research you did in your first 30, 60, 90 days of meeting people. And then think about what qualities you want to have come in from a product manager to be able to adapt to the environment that you're currently in. So everybody wants a product manager is going to execute. I think that we can always test for that during the interview by having them go through something, by having them show us end to end what it is that they took from ideation to testing to, launching. And you can always tell when it was theirs and when it wasn't. So just something to call out to anybody who tries to mess with that. But I would say having somebody who will be able to get in and not just do the execution piece, but embed themselves in the company as it is today and the culture. I had a great conversation this week with my PMs that I ended up hiring about like us being culture, like the catalyst and just changing things. So it's do we continue to build the way we were building before, or do we change a lot of things in service of growing the business? And so that's what you want to look for as a product leader. Are you looking to have somebody come in and just go with status quo, or are you looking to have somebody come in and help you change the way things are operating at the organization? And then again, I mentioned the tactical. How do you hire the right people in terms of their skill set? The other thing is, you know, I would encourage you to make sure you're bringing in those people's peers to the next to all the interviews that you possibly can if you're having a lengthy interview process. So for me, when I was bringing in my product managers, you want to see how well they're going to partner and how well they're going to vibe with their engineering counterpart. You want to see how their communication is and and they can also test for technical acumen at that point, right? Like I don't think product managers need to be highly technical unless you're a technical product manager. But there's an element of there's this way you have to engage with engineers that you want to make sure you bring those people in to help you test that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Really succinct answer on that one. And guys, we have time for maybe just one or two more questions. And Tyler, yes, I am getting to yours right now. So in line with hiring product managers, you talked about there's a need to essentially assess gaps in the organization before you even go and hire people. Do you have any tips for how you can rapidly, I guess, assess or audit the situation in the organization in terms of what skills and talent you currently have on staff, or what practices you might need to focus on?
Is this basically asking how do you get ramped up on the people that you inherited to make sure that you're
Yes.
setting yourself up and them for success? You just have
Yes.
a conversation. Like I mean, like I something that I saw in one of my past roles was I asked my leader, my manager, hey, can you give me your thoughts on these humans here? Like, do you feel like where do you feel their strengths are? Blah, blah, blah. And the answer was an amazing one, which was, I actually don't want to answer you on that. I think you need to take a little bit of time to check this out yourself. Give yourself a couple weeks. I have an opinion. If you truly want my opinion by the end of those couple weeks, I'll give it to you. But this is on you. And I thought that was awesome. That was, them telling me right away, "Your time needs to be spent making sure that you're digging in with these people.
Mhm.
Prioritize your time and understanding what they're doing and what they're not doing. Figure out whether they're a fit for where we're going." That was another piece of advice was like, "Hey, this is where we are as a company. I need you to figure out by engaging with them if they're gonna be the people that are gonna up level us or if we need to make some changes." And or if it's just like, hey, I think we need to upskill these people, why don't you figure out the areas because we truly really love having them at the company, right? So
Mm.
um I think my advice there is you have to put in the work. You cannot you certainly can go ask a whole bunch of people, they'll give you their opinions. The other thing to remember is that you're now the new leader. You're now their manager. Your dynamic is probably going to be very different with those people. It may be good, it may be bad. I've had instances where there haven't been product leaders and it was just me coming in and they're like, we've been craving somebody to, do all this stuff with us, not for us, or tell us what to do. And that's a welcome approach. Like they're like, okay, we're ready to take this on and learn with you. So you have to put in the work. That's my answer. You have to
Yeah.
do it. You can't rely on other people.
Yeah, there are no shortcuts here. I do find it helpful to have at least a framework going into something like that. We like to use a framework of like right person, right seat.
Yes.
So does that person fit with the company values? And then does that person have the capacity and the skills and want their job, right? So, doing that is an assessment that does take time and it's part of your relationship building when you're a leader.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. I have a final question for you. Since a number of the folks in the audience were either looking for a new role or potentially looking to reinvigorate their team, if you were take the perspective of somebody currently interviewing for a new role at their current company,
Mhm.
do you have any advice for what they should do to prepare
For a leadership role, is
for a
that what?
leadership role? Correct.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've seen this before. I've coached some people on it. First thing is, since you're at your existing company, you're going to be taking on potentially a different role that has a different perception of it, right? And so I've seen where people have taken on leadership roles and then their peers are like, "Oh, I don't know how to engage." Now that you might be my boss, or you will be somebody higher than me. So you have to be conscious of that, and just remember that you're still going to be working with these humans. So I would say make sure that you are collecting as much feedback as you possibly can from people on where you've done very well, what you feel as if what they feel as if you can improve on, and take that with you to have that conversation with your manager or your potential next manager. Like, here's where I know that I have done some things that can contribute to this role, and here are some humans that are actually supporting this, by their words. But here's where I know that I need a little bit of coaching, and here's what I'm going to do to actually get to that next step. The other thing is you should, and people get really upset sometimes hearing this, but like you should be doing a couple elements of that role already if you want to step
Mhm.
into it and be able to show that that's what you've done, because it's showing that like you already were thinking about it, you've already started putting in a little bit of that work, because it's going to help both you and the organization, and call attention to that. And the other thing is call attention to what you've done and make it very clear what it is you're going to do when you get into that seat. And go back to data metrics, start to think about numbers and milestones that you want to set in place, and make that very transparent to the person that you're going to be working for, or the org that you're going to be moving into, because they're going to want to know, not just, hey, you're going to come in, you're going to create this process, or hey, you're going to come in and coaches. It's like, how are you going to measure that success, and how are you thinking about showing us what you are going to bring to the table early on?
Yeah. I like that story, Christine, because I think it echoes back to even when you were talking about how you got into product management. It's like you were doing the role already
Yeah.
as well. So it's very consistent in your background to be able to show that proof of actually thinking about that kind of role before you step into it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Christine, for this wonderful discussion. I always get to learn something in these conversations. For those of you who joined us, thank you so much for your questions. If you have any more, you can please reach out to us, I think on LinkedIn. And today I'm excited to announce, for those of you who are product leaders and want a free and quick way to assess your team's capabilities and maturities, not their skills, but their product management practices, Productside has released a first ever product management team assessment, and it assesses, essentially it asks 30 questions around product management practices. Once you answer that, you'll get a report of your maturity according to our Productside blueprint. It's a really useful tool. And if you're interested in diving into your assessment results with us, we are offering a complimentary 30-minute session with one of our experts. As well, we just wanted to let you also know that for attending this webinar, you get this coupon if you would like to attend any of our trainings that are coming up this month. We have optimal product management, digital product management, and agile product management courses all running in the next few weeks. And with that, again, a big thank you to everyone who joined us, and a huge one to Christine. Christine, thank you so much for just being a a fantastic product leader, and being willing to share your advice and your stories with our audience. I guarantee you, I hear it from our fans. These conversations really help people set themselves up in their career. So
Thank you.
big thank you. All right. And everybody else, feel free to join us next time. I think in a couple of weeks, we're running a webinar with Zeta.io, the winner of our AI product management product pick'em. And Christine, you know Prashant as
I
well,
do.
right?
Yeah, Prashant's a good friend of mine. That's awesome. Yeah.
Yes. So Prashant will be sharing with our product management audience how you could use AI to do customer discovery practices. Till next time, bye, everyone.
All right. Thank you.